Welcome PSY 364 students. This is my week 12 commentary. This is the week prior to the Thanksgiving week. So we're starting to get into the holiday season, and being that this is week 12 of 15 weeks together, it's not hard to see the end in sight for the semester. That being said, this week and the 2 weeks that follow, Thanksgiving and then week 13, we'll be dealing with some very difficult subject matter, and I would encourage you to participate in the online discussion. Quite frankly, this semester, students in this class haven't yet fully engaged in, or at least not to the degree that I would hope, in the course discussion. And so please do so, as I think the richness and indeed the difficulty of the subject matter this week and in the next 2 weeks is hard to understate. This week I wanted to go out of the text readings, being that we're in good shape as far as the textbook is concerned already. And I wanted us to, in a very straightforward way, consider the relationship between the male psyche and extreme behaviors, both good and evil. I'm going to use the term evil today, partly because I've been studying the subject matter and have developed a special topics course on the psychology of evil and humor. More about that at another time. The point being is that I think it's important to name extreme and harmful behaviors, certainly unacceptable behaviors, and the term evil seems to serve a useful purpose in this regard. Next week we'll be looking at the issues of men's behavior and boys' behavior in the context of clinical psychology and mental disorders. But I definitely wanted to address the behaviors, the very destructive as well as the very heroic behaviors of males this week, before we medicalize or rush to diagnose atypical behaviors as being associated with mental disorders. We'll again consider that difficult challenge next week. So from my own perspective, it's seemingly a statement of the obvious to see, first of all, that males are disproportionately associated with cruel, sadistic, and certainly masochistic behaviors, and again, separate from any clinical or diagnostic issues. This week, in one of your supplemental readings, you'll read about 2 teenage boys who essentially were charged with extreme cruelty to animals. And that's a good example of the kind of behaviors that we want to understand the motivation for and indeed the causes of, insofar as we have time and interest to explore these issues. I paired the study of negative extreme behaviors, antisocial behaviors, sadomasochistic behaviors, with the behaviors that are extremely positive, and that is to say the behaviors of men who, and boys, who express altruism and indeed patriotism and loyalty to family and friends in extreme ways. I do this knowing there's some risk of jolting you, the students who are considering these matters. And the reason I do this is I want us to consider both the differences and the commonalities in males who indulge in extreme behaviors. I believe that it is fair to say that in the psychology of risk-taking and indeed sensation-seeking, there are some common elements here. and more on that when we engage in discussion. So in this week, I've included a Psychology Today article titled "Is Being Heroic a Guy Thing?" I think that's a good read, and similarly the case study of the abusive teenage boys in Texas. And of course, I'm mindful of this week's shooting, Texas church shooting of conducted by Devin Kelly. And next week we'll take that case up, simply because I know that this individual does have a long diagnostic and clinical history. But my own position is that extreme negative behaviors, as extreme positive behaviors, need not be automatically diagnosable. So more on that as we go on. I would like to say I encourage you online to read about male shame and also look up the term, quote, the disposable males or throwaway males. I think there is interesting material to study in looking at this from an evolutionary point of view, and considering the thesis which is out there, which I personally think is an oversimplification. But there is a thesis out there simply saying that for evolutionary reasons, the male gender as such is associated with disposability. Now, I say that simply because A, the information is out there, and B, it's a thesis that ought to be at least considered. And we can certainly engage that conversation as well. So, looking at non-clinical extreme negative behaviors and non-clinical heroic behaviors, and asking what does this have to do with the male psyche is our theme for this week. Finally, I've also included a video in this week's materials, a TED Talk by Phil Zimbardo. I've introduced him to you earlier in this course. He is the one who was talking about the Lucifer effect and his own studies on the emergence of evil, which is not gender specific, although all of the subjects in his Stanford prison experiment were indeed males. But he has a well thought out and long studied point of view on the emergence of evil, and also, lesser known to the public, he's done a fair bit of work on the study of what makes people step forth to be heroes. So I think his video is the inspiration for my combining these two forms of extreme behavior in this week's study. All right, I thank you for your attention. This week's video is just under 9 minutes, so I hope that's not too long going forth. And please do post your own questions on the discussion board or respond to the questions that I'll be posting there over the course of the week. Thanks very much for your efforts. And final note, again, you should be working on your course projects now and planning for your oral presentation at either workshop number 3 or at a peer session that you and others in the class have organized. I know that one effort is underway to organize an off-schedule peer group, and that's fine. I support that, and I encourage you to post your plans in Dr. K's office. If need be, email all the students and myself in the class so as we can have a discussion on all of your options as far as doing your oral presentation. Thanks very much.